Good morning and thank you very much for joining us. This is BizCheck. We're live from Broadcasting House. And as usual, we delve deep into the world of business as well as economy and financial matters. This week has been quite challenging for the economy. It is started on a wrong footing for the economy. Mass demonstrations that led to the closure of businesses and more so here in Nairobi. And you know what? Nairobi is the economic heartbeat of Kenya and the region. And this is expected to have serious ramifications on the economy going forward. And if the threat by Azimio la Umoja to sustain the mass demonstrations twice a week is coming to pass, then you know for sure we are in for a long, dull trip. Well, I say this is BizCheck, where we focus on matters economy, business, as well as finances. According to government statistics, the economy lost about 2 billion shillings on Tuesday. And that is not factoring in the ripple impact of this. Because remember, there were so many hotel cancellations, there were so many business cancellations, meetings, and of course, there were so many delays in terms of flights and people who were stuck in traffic jams. So the multiplying effect is likely to be in tens of billions of shillings. And the question is this: can a battered economy like ours continue to handle more of these pressures? And your answer and my answer is as good as our guess tonight. This morning, of course, this is going to be our focus because I have a very interesting picture of Nairobi here. And I want to take you to this wall. Look at this. You see, Nairobi looks absolutely stunning from above, with towering skyscrapers and, of course, glimmering new towers. It looks absolutely beautiful. But you know for sure, when this town is disturbed, then the economy of the country and the region is likely to bear greater responsibility. And that's why Nairobi ought to be kept as calm as possible. I say this is BizCheck, and of course today we just want to focus on the state of our economy. We are coming from a very rough patch. The global pandemic in terms of coronavirus battered our economy, and then we got into a serious drought that has somehow ravaged the agriculture sector, which contributes about 26% to our GDP. And before then, remember, we also came from a highly competitive political period, and of course, this being a cyclical event, it usually have a bearing effect on the economy. And so we just want to have a look at how much can the economy handle this morning. Joining me in studio is Peter Macharia. He's the CEO of Jijenge Credit. They're in the business of lending money, and of course, he understands a thing or two about the economy. He's joining me in studio because that is going to form the basis of our conversation this morning. Macharia, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, I want to hear from you. Based on Monday's event, has the business managed to recover fully?
Thank you, Brian, for inviting me to my #1 TV station, that's KBC.
Yeah.
I really appreciate. Well, the economy was shaken a bit, but what I can assure you is that Kenyans are resilient. Mm-hmm. The Kenyan economic foundation is very strong, and we can't let go the economy because we don't have any other place to go. Mm-hmm. Kenya is our home, Kenya is our country, and we must protect it. Mm-hmm. And I will encourage that peace prevails and dialogue takes place. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Of course, many businesses, and especially here in Nairobi, were forced to close down on Monday. And that is what you call a lost business. And that's why I was asking you, when you look at, now we had Tuesday, Wednesday, today is Thursday. As the business community, have you managed to recover fully or go back to what we call the post-mass demonstrations?
Well, to be frank, we've not been able to recover fully or to go back to where we were. Mm-hmm. And it's gradually picking up. Mm-hmm. By tomorrow, I believe we will have restored back the foot traffic and the business volumes. But all said and done, peace should prevail. And I'm happy for the bishops that have offered to mediate and have the two protagonists sit down and talk together. Yes.
Of course, the business you're saying is, from tomorrow, that's when you expected business to recover fully to pre-mass demonstrations. But we also have to be alive to the fact that, the Azimio Umoja has also called for more demonstrations on Monday and Thursday next week. How would these make the economy to look like and business at large?
Now, if the mandamano in quotes are going to be for the long haul, it's definitely going to affect our business because there are business deals that take long to complete. For example, investors who are planning to invest billions, they just don't wake up and invest overnight. They do a lot of research. It's a process. And if the environment, the peace within the city is not there, they will hold those transactions, those investments, or even pull out or cancel them. It also applies with the tourism industry because you cannot book Masai Mara for one night then go back to Europe. It's a long holiday. And therefore, those tourists who are set to visit and they see that the mandamano are going to take place for a long period, they are definitely also going to cancel the bookings. And therefore, by and large, the economy is going to be affected. Yes.
If the mandamanos or mass demonstrations are sustained, which sectors of the economy are likely to be the biggest casualties?
The biggest casualties will be tourism. The Nairobi Stock Exchange, where most of the investments are made by foreigners. And any investment that relies on logistics or transport, because once the transport corridor is disrupted, that free flow of goods and services are also going to be affected. So those are the key major areas that are going to be hard hit for the first few days. Yes.
And let's even talk about tourism that you have really talked about. It is the third biggest forex exchange earner for the country. Last year, the earnings were in the excess of 100 billion shillings. And we know that it's a highly fluid kind of an industry that relies on, number one, the optics, number two, the sentiment. So we're likely to see hotels, cancellations, flight bookings, cancellations, and so much. And so, what will happen to this industry going forward?
Well, the hotel industry is very fluid, and it's affected by such scenarios that are happening currently. And it's also very competitive because there are other destinations that compete to the Kenyan tourism destinations. And therefore, if there's a small disruption, that market, the Kenyan business, the Kenyan tourists or the tourist visitors, they might opt for those other tourist destinations within the region. That is Tanzania, Rwanda, where there is a lot of peace prevailing. And therefore, we need to have leaders who are statesmen who can now put Kenya first and put their personal problems aside and solve the issue. Yes.
I saw something that was posted by Mohammed Hersi. He's a chairperson of Kenya Hotel Keepers Association, and that was on Monday, where he sent a clip of thousands of tourists at Mombasa International Airport fleeing to Tanzania and Zanzibar, and he said that was the quiet happenings in Mombasa, and there has been a lot of cancellations. What should we do, as a country, when we see those kind of images of visitors who are on a long-haul holiday in Kenya now, cancelling their bookings and transferring the bookings to Tanzania?
The first thing we should do as Kenyans is to support any peace-loving Kenyan or any person who is offering to mediate the two protagonists. And we should discourage any person who is saying that there should be no discussion. It should not be called handshake, but they can have lunch. The two protagonists can have lunch. They can have coffee. They can have supper or dinner and discuss on how to put the temperatures down so that now all Kenyans can benefit.
All Kenyans can benefit. The other sector that is likely to feel the impact of this is, of course, the transport industry. And we saw the kind of disruptions that happened on Monday where trucks were grounded, trains were also grounded. And what is going to happen if this situation persists?
It's true the logistics and transport segment is very easily disrupted because we have yet to come up with bypasses that can overpass or bypass major towns. And therefore, maybe what I can advise the transporters or people who are transporting goods to maybe transport those goods in the evening when the activities or the mandamanos are not happening. So that because mandamanos have a time frame, they're supposed to happen between 8 and 6 during the day. And therefore when it's at night, they can transport their goods and services to various consumers, to the airports, to the port. And therefore that would be a better alternative for them.
And definitely, I mean, this is also going to have a major impact on us as a country because, look, for the last 15 years, we've been trying to build a 24-hour economy, and that's why, you know, there has been significant investment in highways and byways, bypasses, railway systems, ports and airports, so that people can continue to transact even at night. But now, if then we are going to resort to then transacting during the nighttime alone, and we know for sure that human beings are more productive during daytime, then what are we doing to ourselves as an economy?
Well, we can put that to, or rather we can blame ourselves for the poor planning and lack of implementation of the 24-hour economy. But all said and done, the structures are already there, because if you look at how a 24-hour economy operates, it needs supportive infrastructure like roads. There is now enough lighting in our streets and highways, and there is enough security. And therefore, the county governments need to encourage the 24-hour economy so that maybe people like hawkers can be encouraged to sell in the evening. Restaurants, hotels, various services should be available at night, and therefore it will take our country very far in terms of income, tax generation, employment opportunities, and the creation of continuous and seamless service delivery to any person who wants a service, whether day or night. That would be a very big plus to the Kenyan economy. Yes.
Oh, well, if you're just joining us, we're just looking at the Kenya economy, bearing in mind that you know, it has been a challenging week, and it's likely to be a challenging week going forward with the call for mass actions by the Azimio la Umoja next week. And we're just looking at what exactly happened in the week, the impact this is likely to have on the Kenyan economy, and the long-term impact of this, and what is the way forward. Jijenge CEO Peter Mashari is in studio with us. He's trying to break down for us the situation, and we also would want to hear from you. At O'Brien Kimani is my Twitter handle. At KBC Channel 1 is our official Twitter handle. Please get down there, send us your feelings, send us your questions, and of course your comments. And who knows, you may end up being mentioned right here live on KBC. Let's go back to the conversation. I mean, is there any way that we can have these mass demonstrations and at the same time have the economy going on, or have economic activities going on. And somehow we saw this in South Africa on Monday. They also had a national shutdown. You know, people were expecting that there will be riots, there will be chaos, but somehow the people down there, ended up surprising us. The shutdown was largely successful, but peaceful at the same time. Is it possible for us to have our demonstrations peaceful while at the same time our economic activities are going on?
Yes, we can have peaceful mass demonstrations, because if you compare the meetings for Azimio before the mass demonstrations, they were all peaceful. Because I remember the Right Honorable former Prime Minister had meetings at Jivajin Gardens, and there was peace. So we need to find out who provokes the riots, who provokes the violence, and most likely that back might stop with the training of our police forces, because before the mass demonstrations, peace prevailed. All the meetings the Azimio coalition called were peaceful. How is it now that when they are calling for these mass demonstrations, there's some violence? And I believe we can hold peaceful mass demonstrations like South Africa, like any other country, even in Europe. Yes.
It's possible.
It's possible, yes.
So, I mean, how then do we train our people to learn to appreciate what the role economic activities play in our economy, and at the same time, to make people exercise their constitutional rights of freedom of expression and freedom of association?
Well, I think it's a matter of having a clear-cut procedures and channels of ventilating. Because if somebody wants to present, if the mass protesters want to present a protest note to somebody, either they can delegate they can identify who should receive, or they should come up with an office to be receiving those protest notes, so that there are no other issues after that. Because once you present your papers, that's it. You walk back home, and there will be no other people in the streets of Nairobi. Yes.
Is there any way that our security agencies can ensure that people are going on with their activities, with their business and economic activities, and at the same time, those who are protesting are doing so and respecting those who are not protesting?
Well, that's a very tough question, because it calls for a lot of personal discipline on the side of the protesters, and at times, just as much as security will be provided, there will be a few rotten apples here and there who might want to snatch something from an innocent passers-by. And therefore, it calls for enough police escort, police security, so that as the protesters walk through identified lanes, identified routes, there's some decency, there's some discipline on all the protesters.
If you're just joining us, the conversation that we're having in studio is the mass demonstrations that were there on Monday, the kind of impact they had on our economy, and if this is sustained, what is likely to happen to the economy. And I want to take you back to the year 2018, when we had similar mass demonstrations, and back then it was reported that for that duration of time, which was about 3 or 4 months, the economy lost more than 30 billion shillings. That was in 2018. The question is, can we afford to lose the same this time around? And bearing in mind that the economy is coming out of a very, very difficult path. The drought situation has exacerbated an already dire situation. The agriculture sector, which supports about 25% of Kenya's economy, has really undergone through a rough patch. And growth in that sector is likely to be depressed because of low productivity. And so the question is, how much more can the economy hold? And what should we do to ensure that, yes, the rights of people to demonstrate peacefully is upheld, and yes, the right of other people to continue with their economic activities is also upheld? And the other question is, can the two exist together? We have seen it work elsewhere. Right now, France is undergoing through major protests because of the war in Ukraine. Majority of the people are opposing the war in Ukraine, and also some people are opposing plans to increase the age of pensions or pensioners. And at the same time, the economic activities around Paris and major cities, is still going on. Can we borrow and live from them, how they're conducting themselves? And that is a question that we need to ask ourselves, and we need to find a solution. And I want to take you back on Monday when there was widespread demonstrations in a number of counties, and one of them being Nairobi, which was the most affected, in Kisumu, in Migori, and in a number of counties. And we know that the government said that the economy lost about 2 billion shillings that day because there was mass closure of businesses, and of course there was little business activity that was taking place. And the unfortunate thing is that the organizers of the mass demonstrations, they have announced that starting next week, Monday and Thursday will be Mandamano days. And the question that we're asking ourselves is, what are these doing to our economy? And can we demonstrate at the same time we allow people to continue with their economic as well as business activities? Jijenge Credit CEO Peter Masharia is in studio. He has been helping us to go around this interesting topic, and let's now continue. As I was telling you, there was that clip of tourists, at the Mombasa International Airport leaving for Tanzania, Zanzibar. Of course, it takes time, before you can build up a goodwill image, if I'm allowed to say so, on the international market. And if you ask so many of those tourists, they'll still tell you that Kenya is still not a safe destination at this point, and this is likely to drag on for months. How do we ensure that even as we go on with our protest, with our picketings, we don't tarnish the image of this country, the reputation of this country?
Well, thank you, Brian. I think the first thing that I had even said earlier is that the two main protagonists need to be statesmen and have coffee, dinner, or some tea. And once they have it, they should be able to itemize their issues, the issues that can be resolved immediately, medium-term issues and long-term issues. And from that meeting, they should take very many photos, smiling and in different positions. And I can assure you, those demonstrations you're seeing and those tourists that you're seeing that are taking off to other different destinations will stop going. These issues that foreign countries are saying that Kenya is unsafe, they will stop, they will cease. And Kenya will be rated as the best and safest place. And after that, there should be continuous dialogue. We need to encourage the church to mediate, to be problem solvers and support the country so that it is for the good of everyone that peace prevails. Yeah.
And I like the fact that you're talking about sitting down and having a cup of tea, and Kenya being a leader of tea production in the world. Actually, we are number 3. It means that we have an abundance of tea in this country, and the beauty about it is that people can decide to set aside their differences and agree to work together. Yes, differences can exist, but of course there is a way that people can agree to work together despite the differences. The other thing that we also need to be wary of is the fact that the country has been undergoing through a serious dollar shortage or foreign exchange shortage, and still talking about the tourism industry, it is one of the 3 main foreign exchange earners in this country. And last year, we saw the industry earning about $2 billion plus US dollars. For the Kenyan economy, the target this year is to drive this number to about $3 billion. Are we likely to hit these targets? If the mass demonstrations are sustained?
Well, I know the people in charge of the foreign currency management are not sleeping. They are burning the midnight oil. That is CBK and Treasury. And I believe, and I know they are up to task. And if you listen to the news yesterday, there was a change in the way we purchase fuel. Because initially, the country was purchasing crude oil in dollars. But now they've talked to different countries, I think Dubai,
UAE and Saudi Arabia.
Exactly. So it will be a country-to-country payment. Therefore, we'll be paying the fuel in Kenya shillings. And therefore, all those dollars that are being channeled out will cease being channeled out by end of this month.
Which was about $500 million US dollars.
Yes, every month. And therefore, that 500 million will be now within the country. And then another good point is that we will not be paying fuel upfront. It will be paid, I think they will be getting
a period of 6 months.
Yeah, 6 months credit period, which is very good, very encouraging and a very good strategy. And therefore, I think now the issue of dollar shortage will be a thing of the past.
And so this is likely to ease, the pressure that the Kenya shilling has been having in the last couple of years. Yes. Let's also look at something else that we were discussing here, and this is the issue of logistics and transport. And focusing on agriculture and the Kenya's horticulture industry is also one of the biggest foreign exchange earner. When transport is disrupted, when you don't have cargo being transported to the port of Mombasa, to the cargo to Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, this is of course having also another major impact on our exports. And is there any way that as a country that we can ensure that even as we demonstrate, transporters are being allowed to transport their product?
Yes, I give the alternative of transporting those perishable goods or export goods in the evening. And they just need to make an arrangement with the cargo center at the airport and ensure that their staff and most of the cargo planes leave later in the night after they receive all the goods from up country. So during the day when there are demonstrations, there's no disruption of that transport corridor. And that one will also help a lot in the issue of export, which supports our balance of payments. Yes, and that flow of goods and services will really help. The other proposal is also to have the Minister of Foreign Affairs talk to the governments that might be issuing travel advisories, because tourists also listen to their home countries so much. So we need to mitigate that and tell those embassies that we are peaceful. Whatever demonstrations are happening are peaceful. Police will provide security, and businesses will run normally. So that at least those tourists can feel at home and relax.
And, from Monday's learning curve, we clearly know that Nairobi and Kenya's third largest city in the name of Kisumu were the biggest or were the most affected by these mass demonstrations. What do we need to do to defray, that kind of tension, that kind of disruptions? Because yes, at the end of the day, people can argue that it is their constitutional rights, to congregate, to associate, and of course to express themselves. But on the other hand, it is also the constitutional right of business people, traders, and people to continue with their business activities. So how do we strike this balance as a country?
Well, all I know is that the freedom of demonstration ends when it infringes on the other person's freedom. Mm-hmm. And therefore, my proposal or my strategy or my advice to the people who are protesting is, and also the people who are being protested to, if, for example, they are going to take a memoranda to a certain office, mm-hmm. can that office have a customer service desk where such a memoranda is received and delivered? Mm-hmm. Because I believe once that proposal or letter or whatever they want to deliver has been delivered, mm-hmm. those people have no other business. They will just walk home and sleep. So there should be no hide and seek game. If mm-hmm. At all there's a letter that is supposed to be delivered somewhere, mm-hmm. receive it. A plain letter, there's no harm. You just receive, read, and let's learn on the areas that you're able to, the weak areas or the gray areas or our weak points. Mm-hmm. We should now learn from those kind of criticism.
Very good.
Yes.
Well, if you're just joining us, we're coming to you live from Broadcasting House, and this is a conversation around the economy and the impact of mass demonstrations on Kenya's economy. We are talking to Jijenge Credit Chief Executive Officer Peter Macharia, who is joining us here. We're taking a short break, and thereafter we'll be back with more conversations. Stay right here. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are live from Broadcasting House, and of course the conversation this morning that we have been having in the last 40 minutes or so is the cost of mass demonstrations to the economy and how the economy is likely to bear the impact of this in the long term. And the question also is, what do we need to do to ameliorate the situation? And Peter Macharia is proposing that we need to have a cup of tea together so that we can resolve our differences. Can a cup of tea work? Definitely it can. And we know for sure that Kenya does have abundance of tea leaves, so it's possible for us to sit down over a cup of tea and converse our differences. We continue with the conversation for the next 10 or so minutes, and thereafter we shall be winding up to look at Kenya's health sector. Well, stay right here. And Macharia, the other thing that we need also to ask ourselves is, have we learned from history? I mean, look, the 2007 post-election violence, it touches that it is very easy for things to give in, and it's very easy for a country to plunge into chaos and into mayhem where human beings can turn against each other. So what do we need to do as a country to ensure that we don't get to that treacherous path?
Thank you. The first thing is to look at history and compare what, and look at also the historical performance of, or historical path that other countries went through. Mm-hmm. If you look at Egypt, the Arab Spring, it was sparked off by one protester. Mm-hmm. And every hell broke loose. Mm-hmm. And therefore, if you also look at the local Kenyan scenario. In the past cases where we had mass demonstrations, they started like this and then ended up becoming very tribal. Therefore, our leaders should take a step back and shed off any negative energy, negative advice, and bite the bullet, stop chest thumping, and sit down and have tea, lunch, supper, dinner, or whatever. It should not be called handshake, because that is most people want to relate it to handshake. No, it should not be handshake. It should be a meetup, a meeting between two leaders who I believe can sit down and chart a common cause for the betterment of this country and the success of our country. Yes.
In the past, we have seen, the private sector, which you represent, becoming very strong and, more involved in political matters where at some point they're even becoming mediators. What is the role of the Kenya's private sector in ensuring that, there is harmony, there is peace, there is economic development in this country?
Well, when there are mass demonstrations, the person who is hard hit is the private sector, the SMEs, mama mbogas, and even the corporates. And therefore, they usually take up the first initiative to try and mediate. And a good example of a good, well-organized private sector is KEPSA, which is very organized, has good structures, and is well respected within the government circles. I believe they can team up with the church and help mediate and come up with a very good solution that is long-lasting, that will benefit all Kenyans, not sections of Kenyans, but will take this country to higher levels and more respect internationally. Yes.
Do you think this is happening, probably maybe behind the scenes?
I believe, well, I don't know, I don't have facts, but I believe and hope that initiative has already been started. I saw in yesterday's press the Catholic bishops offering to mediate. And I also believe, apart from those local organizations, I believe our international partners cannot let Kenya fail. And therefore they're also engaging the two coalitions so that there is peace and peace prevails. Yes.
But of course, the onus is on us as Kenyans, to ensure that we maintain peace, because Kenya is more dear to us than to anybody else, and it behoves us as a country to maintain peace, and we do not have to wait for anybody else to come and lecture us or train us on how to maintain peace. We are Kenyans, and Kenya should be our business. It should be the business of all of us to ensure that there is harmony, there is development, there is peace, there is cohesion, there is coexistence in our day-to-day life. And it calls upon each and every one of us to ensure that as a country that is maintained, because as we always say, we only have one Kenya. There is no Kenya B, there is no Kenya C. Well, before we wind up this conversation and before I let Macharia go, when you look at your crystal ball, I want to believe that you have one. What is it telling you? How would this situation look like in the next 3-4 months?
Well, I want to be optimistic and say that and hope and pray that this situation will not boil over to several months, and by next week or even before Monday, the two major coalition partners will have sat down, will have had lunch or dinner or coffee, and agreed on a good way to chart to help Kenya move forward.
Very good.
Yes.
And what is your message to the people that are watching you this morning?
Let's be hopeful. I know Kenyans are resilient. Let's keep praying for our country, for our leaders, so that they can have wisdom, they can be true statesmen. And Kenya is our country. Yes.
Kenya is our country. Well, that is the message from Peter Macharia, the CEO of Jijenge Credit, who has been with us since around 10:15, and of course helping us share with us his insight on what should be the way forward to ensure that the economy doesn't suffer and we move together as a nation. And of course, you have heard it from him. Well, as we say, the responsibility of building Kenya rests on all of us. Not our political leaders, not only our religious leaders. It is upon us as a citizenry. My name is O'Brien Kimani. This is BizCheck. We're taking a short break, and thereafter we are coming back, and of course we want to look at the cost of healthcare in Kenya. Well, I was just going through a report that was released sometimes in 2019, and it was saying that about 1 million Kenyans slide back into poverty because of high cost of healthcare. Our investment is still wanting. What is the way forward? I'll be joined by a healthcare expert. He has an idea or two on how this should be handled. This is BizCheck. Stay right here.